Okay, so let's talk about why you still feel anxious and dysregulated, even when life looks good on the outside, and you've done the work, right? So, what I mean by the work is all the things that we're told to do, right, as high performers, is the meditating, the journaling, the high performance habits, the structure, the discipline, all the things, you name it, like sweat lodges, like whatever. And why, after all of this, you still feel anxious and dysregulated and you can't get out of these loops, okay? Also, I just want to say before we start here, I am 35 weeks pregnant and can't breathe. So if you are like, why is she breathing like a bull just running through the field right now? Like, that is why. Okay, so we're going to ignore that and pretend it's not happening. Um, anyway, I bring this to you to support you. So back in, gosh, it must have been like end of 22, right now, like I remember that I used to wake up every single morning with this unrelenting feeling of anxiety in my system. Like, even when objectively there was absolutely no reason for it. And I just wonder if you can relate to this. Okay, so I would wake up in the morning and I would immediately journal, I would do meditation, I would plan out my day, I would structure everything. I would then go and work out, generally like pretty hard, like a CrossFit workout or something. And still, after all of these things, I still felt anxiety and I just felt really dysregulated. And I didn't know at the time whether it was just me, right? I was like, what am I doing wrong? Because I was doing everything that I was supposed to be doing, right? And I was just at a bit of a loss with it all. So, like, on paper, my life looked great. Okay, I was traveling the world, working nomadically, running my own business, bringing in solid income as an independent management consultant, and life should have just felt amazing. That's what people would expect, right? But it just didn't. And like I said, I was spending these 2 hours at least every single morning just trying to clear this feeling, this unrelenting feeling of anxiety and trying to feel better. And I was doing everything that I was told would help. And still, every morning, the same sick, same feeling in my stomach. And even though on the outside I looked like I had it all together, on the inside, I think, honestly, I was probably like barely coping. And I was definitely at my wits' end with it all. And I was starting to feel like this weird mix of like frustration and defeat and like, what was it? And I'd done the therapy, right? I'd done the talk therapy for freaking months. And she dug into like, was it from my childhood? Like, was it from all these things? And spoiler alert here, like, it wasn't any of that. It was due to some things that I'm going to talk about as we go through this, and then also how we fix it. Okay, so yeah, it was none of that, but I'd done all the things. Okay, so at this point, I had literally just hit my absolute limit. And I was just like, is this how life is supposed to feel? Was everyone secretly living with this constant harm of anxiety too, or was it just me? And I just did not know the answer, but I did know that I did not want to keep feeling like this. So if you're with me and like, if you relate to this, like, you'll know how that feels. Like, is it just, you start to think like, is it just me? Is everyone else getting this right? And is there something I'm just missing? No, there's not. Let me tell you what it actually is. So I took a shot in the dark and I tried something completely different. Okay. So I tried something called rapid resolution therapy, RRT, which I'm now advanced trained in. I work with many people across the board in terms of this process, this technology, which essentially is incredible for clearing negative or unhelpful or unuseful loops that we have, and getting our minds to operate more effectively. So I'd heard about this on a podcast and I was like, oh my God, is it like another freaking therapy? Because I was just done with that. And turns out it was very different. So when I'd heard about it on the podcast originally, like the woman who was talking about it shared her story about stumbling into like an RT session while searching for therapy for anxiety and anger, right? So she'd been doing like standard talk therapy, but instead, and that's what she thought she was going in for, but instead the practitioner used RT to completely shift her patterns in one session, like one. And these were things that had been coming up for her for years, apparently, like big PTSD responses, really big stuff, you know? And I was like, okay, I'm a little bit skeptical because it sounds like it's a bit fast and is it really accurate? But it had to be worth a shot, right? Because at this point, I felt like I'd literally tried everything. So I was desperate. So I gave it a go. So I booked a single session with someone, and I've got to be honest with you and real with you here. Like, this was nothing like anything that I'd ever experienced before. So if I'm real with you, like the session itself felt a bit odd. It didn't look or feel anything like traditional therapy. And we definitely didn't dive into my past, like thank goodness, because I was freaking sick of going there. But we used all sorts of like metaphors and visualizing colors and symbols. And honestly, after the first few minutes, I think like I barely spoke in the session. It was the facilitator, the person that was like facilitating the session, that like did most of the talking. And I remember just laughing a lot. And it was kind of just really interesting because the next day, like after the session itself, I felt like, oh, that was kind of fun, kind of weird, but also I feel light, I feel good, and kind of tired. So it was like evening or whatever. So I went to bed, and then the next morning, I woke up and, like, shit you not, that constant stomach churning anxiety, that feeling that I had been feeling for months and months and months that I could not shift, completely gone. And I was like looking for it, like waiting for it to come back, and it wasn't there. And as the days went on, something even more surprising started to happen. Like, I felt like I just had even more energy. I felt clearer. My focus came back, and I was getting a lot of things done. Like, I wasn't stuck in a loop of, like a procrastination loop, for example. And I just felt like, yeah, I'm excited again. I can move forward and do some things. And what was happening, what I now know as an advanced trained RT practitioner myself, is that my system then was not in a constant crisis mode anymore. So the system had been updated through this single session to update it, say, like, there is no threat anymore. We're good, we're okay, like, shift the block. And everything was just able to operate um, as if the system had been rebooted, and was finally running the way that it was supposed to. And like that's how I knew that in that moment I was onto something. And I am a traditional A-type personality high performer, right? And when I get an idea, when there's something that I want to do, I get out there and do it. And so immediately after that, I started searching, like, how do I training this? How do I get more of this? How do I use it in different like use cases in my life? So I started using it across my relationships, for example, platonic and romantic, to just up level everything. At the time, by the way, like I was single, dating heavily, dating a lot, not that successfully, honestly. Same triggers, same different things coming up. Maybe that's one for a different episode. See, it's already turning into a podcast, and I didn't know that that's what I wanted, but maybe we'll see. And yeah, and I mean, well, like I said, I'm 35 weeks pregnant and in a very happy, loving relationship with my partner. So, you know, things advance pretty well in that department, and pretty quickly as well. But anyway, we've gone off on a tangent, so let's bring it back. Anyway, after this session, like I said, it felt like my system had completely been just rebooted, and then there was all this energy available to be directed towards whatever I wanted it to. You know, imagine getting like several hours of your day back every day where you just don't have to focus on overcoming anxiety. Yeah, I mean, if you're there right now, like, just think about how that would feel. So anyway, that kind of brings us to now, right? So it brings us through this process of like where this started for me, and then also what I did through RRT and the training that I undertook, and that I still do actually. You know, even though I am trained in this technology, I take advanced training all the time. I just constantly am looking at different use cases, different things, because that's how you remain and be even better all the time, right? So that's always ongoing, and it's just a passion and, yeah, addiction for me, I guess you could call it. But essentially, what was happening under the surface that I now know that was causing the anxiety in the first place is that my mind was misreading, outside of my conscious awareness, so outside of what was going on consciously, what I knew what was happening, different things as a threat to my system. Okay, so what that was doing is, as this information was coming in, my mind was perceiving different things as threats. My mind was then trying to get my body to take an action, which was resulting in this feeling of anxiety. Okay. And we can talk about anxious loops more and what that looks like. So basically, my mind was trying to get my body to take an action that it could not take an action for, causing this feeling of anxiety. And I was stuck in this system. Okay. And what was happening physically is that during this experience, and this is what happens to all of us, okay, is that blood leaves the brain in these moments, is directed towards prioritizing our survival, right? So it goes to either arms or legs to make us run really fast, or jaw in an anger response to make us bite really hard. But what that also does is makes us really, really stupid. Okay, so it drives all energy away from strategy, creative thinking, logic, intuition, all of the useful stuff that we need to operate well in life, no matter what we're doing, whether we have jobs, whether we're running our own businesses, whether we're just running our lives. Like, these things, the more access that we have to these things in every single moment, the more successful ultimately we will be and become. So super, super important. And so what was happening, what I now understand, obviously as an advanced trained RRT provider, is that I can tell you that the issue was never about the external circumstances or even some deep-rooted trauma necessarily from my past. The real issue was literally just this. And it's kind of one of those things where all roads lead to Rome. Okay, so it doesn't matter necessarily what the issue is. It matters this only, is that the way that mind was processing information outside of conscious awareness, it was processing it ineffectively. And so what happened in that session for me, and what I now do for other people, is update the system. So there was a data misread. It was saying it was perceiving information as a potential threat. What we then did, went in, let mind know this is not the way that we need to read this information anymore. It is not a threat. We do not need to prioritize this. And therefore, we are able to operate more effectively. Mind gets the update, unconscious mind starts reading information the way that we want it to, and it starts flagging it as safe and not dangerous, and therefore does not try and cause us to take any actions that we cannot take in that moment. Okay, let me give you a real world example. So, and this comes up for me, and also used to come up for me, and used to come up for the clients that I worked with, but is generally something that comes up for quite a lot of people. So there tends to be a lot around like finances for people. So back at that time, even though, like I said, financially I was doing very well, I had consistent income coming in and work and all those things, every time I opened my banking app, I felt this like wave of anxiety. So even though there was more than enough money in there, I'd grown up in this situation where I had a deep fear of not enoughness, and that program was still running in the background. So to the unconscious mind, the part of the mind that is responsible for driving all of our actions, it was still bracing for threat, right? Bracing for impact. I mean, it hadn't got the memo that there was no reason to worry anymore, that things were safe now. And since, as we've already discussed, mind always creates an emotion to get us to do something, to take an action, it was still trying to push me towards a fix, right, for a problem that no longer existed anymore. Now, I know this is a lot to get your head around on first time hearing it, but stay with me, because here's the thing, like, this is happening to us all the time. So our human brain is really prone to dysfunction simply because of how it has evolved. So we have our primitive and more advanced systems trying to process the same data, right? So when we're talking about our primitive and advanced systems, we have our primitive system, which is our unconscious mind, and our advanced system, which is our conscious mind, and they don't always communicate effectively. And when I say that, I mean most of the time. Okay, so this is what causes the data misreads. And when that data gets misread, it leads to glitches in the system, right? So these come out as emotional responses, unhelpful behaviors, reactions, things like that feel huge, but are actually based on outdated information. And when we clear those glitches, we update the program. So that's what I did through RT. And it helped my mind register. Well, it didn't help it. It actually completely updated it. That the perceived threat was no longer an active threat, okay? And that there was nothing to fix. And so no action was needed. There is no danger here. And once my system got the memo, like I said, I got access to everything that's been missing. So all of that clarity, all of that logic, intuition, strategy, energy. And my nervous system had quite literally, in that moment, been updated and upgraded. And here's the best part about it all, is that it doesn't really matter what we've said. It's not about the specific issue that you're dealing with, whether it's anxiety, procrastination, anger, burnout, where it comes from. The process to update it is the same. So once we update that glitch, we can rewrite the program, install the upgrade, and honestly just move forward clearly, confidently, freely, with access to so much more resource internally than we ever did before. And we feel very, very different. Let me tell you, like, the way I feel now is so different to how I feel before. Like, I am chill. Really, it takes a lot to kind of get me wound up or angry or like triggered, I guess would be the word. Doesn't really exist anymore. I'm just like, okay, it's fine. Like, we'll handle it. Whatever comes along, we'll handle it. Because my internal system, my nervous system is regulated and my brain has been updated, that there's not all these perceived threats going on. So if any of this resonated with you, particularly if you are feeling different types of anxiety, any programs that are like, do you know what, this thing is just not working for me anymore and I want to clear it. Although I'm not taking on one-to-one clients actively right now and won't be until July potentially, you can firstly DM me and I will put you on a wait list and we can have a chat anyway about what's been going on for you and see what can be shifted. What we can also do is you can access a resource that I have called Shift It, which helps us shift any unconscious blocks, help us update mind to get it on board with where we're going, and does so in less than 15 minutes. Okay, so it's really, really effective. If you want a taste of what we're doing here, then you are more than welcome to go ahead and send us a DM with the word Shift It, and we'll send that over for you as well. Okay, all right.